My fiancé said his mother would always come first. I believed him. When I got engaged to Daniel, everyone told me I was the luckiest woman alive. He was thoughtful, successful, and the kind of man who remembered tiny details. He knew my favorite coffee order, always carried an umbrella when rain was in the forecast, and never forgot my birthday. There was only one thing people warned me about: his mother. The first time I met her, she hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe and whispered, "Thank you for making my son happy." I thought it was sweet. 10 minutes later, she corrected the way I held a wine glass. By dessert, she'd informed me that Daniel preferred his shirts folded a certain way, and that women who truly love him naturally figure these things out. I laughed it off. Looking back, that should have been my first clue. Daniel and I dated for 3 years before getting engaged. Whenever his mother inserted herself into our plans, he'd shrug and say, "She means well." When she called during date nights, he answered. When she asked him to cancel weekend trips to help with errands she could easily manage herself, he canceled. When she unexpectedly joined us at restaurants, he simply pulled out another chair. It was odd, but I convinced myself it was temporary. Then one evening, while we were discussing wedding plans, he looked at me very seriously and said something I'll never forget. "Mother will always come first." I thought he meant in emergencies. Of course I'd support that, but he shook his head. "Matter what happens, she'll always be my #1 priority." I stared at him. "And your wife? She'll understand." I should have asked more questions. Instead, I smiled awkwardly and changed the subject. A month later, we found the perfect wedding venue. It had a beautiful garden, giant oak trees, and enough room for both of our families. I fell in love with it immediately. So did Daniel. His mother hated it. She preferred a hotel ballroom nearly 2 hours away because she'd attended a cousin's wedding there 15 years earlier. Without asking me, Daniel scheduled a second viewing of her preferred venue, then a third. Then he quietly placed a deposit, not on the place we'd chosen together, on the place she wanted. When I confronted him, he looked genuinely confused. "She has more experience planning weddings. It's our wedding. She just wants what's best." That phrase became the soundtrack of our engagement. Every disagreement ended the same way. She just wants what's best. She chose the caterer. She rejected my florist. She even criticized the color of my bridesmaid dresses because they washed out Daniel's complexion in photographs. At one fitting, she casually suggested I wear my hair differently. Then she hired a stylist without telling me. The stylist showed up at my apartment carrying inspiration photos I had never approved. I thanked her for coming, apologized for the misunderstanding, and sent her home. Within an hour, my future mother-in-law called. "You embarrassed her." "I didn't hire her." "I did." That's exactly the problem. For the first time, the conversation ended with her hanging up on me. I thought maybe we'd finally established a boundary. Instead, things escalated. A week later, Daniel invited me to dinner with his parents. Halfway through the meal, his mother smiled warmly and slid a folder across the table. Inside was a list titled, "Marital Expectations." I honestly believed it was a joke. It wasn't. The document covered everything from holiday schedules to household routines. According to page 3, every Christmas morning belonged exclusively to Daniel's family. Page 5 suggested weekly dinners at her house every Wednesday. Another section recommended that major financial decisions be discussed with her for guidance. Then I reached the final page. It proposed that if we ever bought a home, it should be within a 10-minute drive of hers. I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to laugh. He didn't. He simply said, "She put a lot of effort into this." His father nodded proudly. I closed the folder. "I'm not signing family terms and conditions." His mother smiled politely. "No one asked you to sign it. We just expect you to respect it." That sentence echoed in my head all the way home. A few days later, I discovered she'd been touring houses online, not for herself, for us. Every listing she sent was on her street. One even shared a backyard fence with hers. When I told Daniel I wanted our own space, he answered, "Wouldn't it be nice to have Mom nearby every day?" Every day. The words landed like a warning. Still, I kept hoping things would settle down after the wedding planning stress faded. Instead, they became impossible to ignore. One Saturday morning, I woke up to find Daniel gone. He hadn't left a note. He hadn't texted. Around noon, he finally called. "Sorry, Mom needed help reorganizing her garage." I looked around our apartment. We'd planned to spend the day assembling furniture we'd already paid for. "You left without telling me." She needed me. "So you canceled our plans." She comes first. You know that. For the first time, I believed him, not because he said it, because he proved it. And once I started paying attention, I noticed something else. Every major decision in our relationship had quietly revolved around his mother's preferences. The wedding, the house, the holidays, even the guest list. I wasn't planning a future with one person. I was negotiating with two. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Daniel sounded excited. Great news. Mom found us a wedding gift. I asked what it was. He paused dramatically before answering. She's moving in with us for a while after we get married. I nearly dropped my phone. For how long? She hasn't decided yet. I waited for the punchline. It never came. He had already cleared out the spare bedroom without asking me, without discussing it, without even mentioning it until the decision had been made. And in that exact moment, standing alone in my kitchen with my coffee growing cold, I realized the biggest mistake I'd made was ignoring the red flags. It was assuming they would ever disappear. I wish I could tell you I immediately called off the wedding. I didn't. When you've spent years building a life with someone, it's surprisingly easy to convince yourself that one more conversation will fix everything. So I asked Daniel to meet me at our favorite little cafe after work. I arrived early with a notebook, not because I wanted to argue, but because I wanted clarity. When he sat down, I looked him in the eye and asked a simple question. If we disagree about something important after we're married, who gets the final say? He didn't even think about it. We'll figure it out. That's not what I asked. Stirred his coffee. If it involves Mom, I'm going to hear her out. If she disagrees with me, she usually has a good reason. That's still not an answer. Finally, he sighed. I don't understand why you're making this such a big issue. I closed my notebook. That tells me everything I need to know. For the next few days, I focused on work and tried to clear my head. Then my maid of honor called. Have you approved the seating chart? What seating chart? The one your future mother-in-law emailed everyone. I almost laughed. There shouldn't be a seating chart yet. Well, there is. She forwarded me the document. Not only had Daniel's mother rearranged the entire reception, but she had also moved several of my closest friends to the back of the room to make space for distant relatives I'd never even met. My parents had been placed at separate tables. The head table included Daniel, his mother, his father, and me. I stared at the screen. She had literally seated herself between the groom's side and the bride's side as if she were part of the couple. When I called Daniel, he said, "It's just a draft." So why didn't anyone ask me? She was trying to help. That phrase again, always trying to help, never asking. The final straw came a week later. I walked into the bridal boutique for my last fitting and immediately sensed something was wrong. The dress hanging in the fitting room wasn't mine. It was white, yes, but the sleeves were different. The neckline had changed. The train was much longer. The consultant looked confused. I thought these were the alterations you requested. I didn't request any alterations. She checked her paperwork. The instructions came from your future mother-in-law. I took a slow breath. She authorized changes to my wedding dress. She said she had the family's approval. I asked the consultant to bring out the original order. Thankfully, the modifications hadn't been completed yet. I canceled every unauthorized change on the spot. As I walked out, my phone rang. It was Daniel. Mom said you upset the boutique staff. No, I replied calmly. I stopped someone from redesigning my dress without permission. She was only trying to make it more elegant. It was never her decision. When I got home, I sat quietly on the couch and looked around the apartment, the save-the-dates, the sample invitations, the color swatches, the guest list. Every wedding item suddenly felt heavy, not because I doubted marrying Daniel, because I doubted whether there was actually room in his life for a partner. That weekend, my father invited me to lunch. I hadn't planned to tell my parents everything, but somehow it all spilled out. The venue, the guest list, the spare bedroom, the dress. The marital expectations folder, the promise that his mother would always come first. When I finally stopped talking, my dad was silent for a long moment. Then he asked one question. Nothing changed after the wedding. Could you live like this for the next 30 years? I opened my mouth to answer. Nothing came out, because deep down I already knew. On Monday morning, I arrived at work and found a bouquet of flowers on my desk. There was no card from Daniel. Instead, the note read, "Looking forward to being family. I have wonderful ideas for your future." Signed, Mom. Daniel's mom. Just Mom. That afternoon, I received an email from our wedding planner asking me to confirm a newly scheduled meeting. I hadn't booked one. The attendee list included me, Daniel, and his mother. I replied with a single sentence. I will not be attending meetings where decisions about my marriage are made by someone who isn't getting married. Then I closed my laptop and went for a long walk. For the first time since getting engaged, I allowed myself to imagine a future where I didn't spend every holiday negotiating boundaries or every milestone seeking someone else's approval. The thought didn't scare me. It brought relief. That evening, Daniel knocked on my apartment door carrying takeout from my favorite restaurant. "I think we've both been stressed," he said with a hopeful smile. Before I could answer, another car pulled into the driveway. His mother stepped out of the passenger seat. She waved cheerfully, walked straight past me, and carried a tape measure into the house. "What's she doing?" I asked. Daniel looked almost surprised that I didn't know. "She's measuring the spare room." "For what?" "So she can order furniture before she moves in." I looked from him to her and back again. Boxes of fabric samples, paint swatches, and furniture catalogs were already piling up in my hallway. Plans were being made. Money was being spent. And once again, I hadn't been asked. That's when I quietly reached into my purse, pulled out the engagement ring, and closed my hand around it. Neither of them noticed. But I knew that before the week was over, someone was going to receive a surprise they would never see coming. I didn't hand the ring back that night. Not because I had changed my mind. Because I wanted to be absolutely certain that I wasn't making a decision out of frustration. So I slipped it into my jewelry box and spent the next few days watching instead of arguing. Sometimes silence reveals more than questions ever could. And it didn't take long. By Wednesday, Daniel's mother had already ordered curtains for the spare bedroom. On Thursday, she sent me links to matching towels and bedding, writing, "I think these will make me feel at home. If I move in, when I move in." I never replied. Friday evening brought another surprise. Daniel showed up carrying 3 shopping bags. He looked excited. I picked up some furniture. "What?" "The spare room." I reminded him that we hadn't agreed anyone would be living there. He smiled as if I were worried about nothing. "It'll save time later." I looked at the unopened boxes stacked in the hallway. Every decision seemed to follow the same pattern. Someone else made the plan. I found out after the money had already been spent. The next morning, my best friend Chloe invited me out for breakfast. The second I sat down, she looked at me carefully and asked, "Are you happy?" I almost answered automatically. Then I stopped. I loved Daniel, but I was constantly anxious. Every phone call from his mother made my stomach tighten. Every family gathering felt like a meeting where I'd be assigned another responsibility I never requested. By the time breakfast ended, Chloe reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You shouldn't have to compete for first place in your own marriage." Words stayed with me. That weekend, Daniel's family hosted a barbecue. I almost skipped it. Instead, I went because I wanted one final chance to see whether I was imagining things. Within 15 minutes, his mother proved I wasn't. She stood in front of everyone holding a clipboard. "I've made a few updates to the honeymoon." I blinked. "Our honeymoon?" "Yes," she said proudly. "I noticed your original destination involved too much walking, so I canceled those reservations and found a lovely beach resort instead." Jaw nearly hit the floor. "You canceled our trip. It's for your own good." I turned slowly toward Daniel. "Did you know about this?" He hesitated. "She mentioned it. You were okay with it?" I figured she was helping. Helping. The word had completely lost its meaning. I excused myself and walked into the backyard just to breathe. A few minutes later, Daniel followed. "You're overreacting." I looked at him in disbelief. "Your mother changed our honeymoon. She was trying to improve it." "No," I said quietly. "She was replacing our choices with hers." He rubbed his temples. "I hate being caught between you two." I answered with the calmest voice I could manage. "You're not caught between us. You're choosing." For the first time since we met, he didn't have a response. The barbecue ended awkwardly and I drove home alone. That night, I opened a notebook and wrote 2 columns. The first was titled, "Reasons to Stay." I filled in exactly 3 lines. The second was titled, "Reasons to Leave." By the time I reached the bottom of the page, I had stopped counting. The next morning, I called every vendor connected to the wedding, the florist, the photographer, the bakery, the planner. I didn't cancel anything. I simply added passwords to the accounts and instructed them that no changes were to be accepted unless they came directly from me. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was the wedding planner. "I just wanted to let you know someone attempted to change the ceremony timeline this morning but couldn't provide the password." "Who was it?" There was a short pause. "Your future mother-in-law." I thanked her and hung up. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt strangely peaceful. Because the decision I'd been struggling with suddenly became obvious. That evening, Daniel arrived carrying takeout again. Before he could say a word, I placed the engagement ring gently on the coffee table between us. He stared at it. "What's this?" I took a slow breath. It's the first decision about our future that belongs only to me. Looked from the ring to my face, waiting for me to laugh or explain. I did neither. Instead, I slid a folded sheet of paper across the table. It wasn't an ultimatum. It was a simple list of boundaries any healthy partnership should be able to respect. Make decisions together. Respect each other's independence. Don't invite anyone to live with us without mutual agreement. Don't let outside voices override the people actually in the relationship. Daniel read every line in silence. Then he looked up and asked the question I had been expecting. If I can't agree to this, I met his eyes. Then you've already made your choice. The room fell completely silent. Outside, the sun was setting. Inside, the future we had spent years planning was balanced on a single answer that neither of us could avoid any longer. Daniel didn't answer right away. He looked at the paper, then at the engagement ring, then back at me. Finally, he said the words I had expected all along. I can't ask my mother to change who she is. I nodded slowly. And I'm not asking you to. He looked relieved for half a second, then I continued. I'm asking whether you're willing to build a marriage where we make decisions together. Relief disappeared. She's always been there for me. I know, she sacrificed so much. Sure she did. She deserves to be included. Included isn't the same as in charge. Neither of us spoke after that. Eventually, he stood up, picked up the ring box, and quietly left my apartment. There was no shouting, no dramatic exit, just the sound of the front door closing. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages. Some came from friends asking if the wedding rumors were true. Others came from Daniel's relatives insisting there had been a misunderstanding. Then his mother called. I let it go to voicemail. She left 3 messages. The first said I was making an emotional decision. The second insisted we should meet to work out the details. The third was only one sentence. You're throwing away your future. I listened to it twice. Then I deleted it. A week later, I met with the wedding planner in person and officially canceled the event. It was disappointing, of course. Months of planning vanished with a few signatures. But as I walked out of the office, I felt lighter than I had in a very long time. Friends gathered around me in unexpected ways. My maid of honor helped me box up decorations. My parents insisted on taking me out to dinner. Even coworkers surprised me with flowers and encouraging notes. One of them smiled and said, "A canceled wedding is expensive. An unhappy marriage is even more expensive." I couldn't argue with that. Meanwhile, word slowly spread through Daniel's extended family about what had actually happened. People learned about the venue changes, the guest list, the honeymoon reservations, the surprise move-in plans, the altered wedding dress, and the document listing expectations for married life. Relatives who had once congratulated his mother on helping began asking uncomfortable questions. Some admitted they hadn't realized how many decisions had been made without my knowledge. Others quietly apologized for assuming I had agreed. Several months passed. My life settled into a peaceful routine again. I focused on work, accepted new projects, traveled for conferences, and spent weekends with people who respected my boundaries. Then one afternoon, while shopping for groceries, I spotted Daniel in another aisle. For a moment, neither of us moved. Eventually, he walked over. He looked older somehow, not physically, just tired. We exchanged polite greetings and talked for a few minutes about work and mutual friends. Before leaving, he said something I'll never forget. "You meant it when you said you wouldn't compete for your own marriage." I did. "I thought you'd eventually compromise." I already had. Looked down at his cart. "I didn't realize how much." Was sadness in his voice, but no anger, just recognition. We wished each other well and went our separate ways. As I reached the parking lot, I realized I wasn't carrying regret. I was carrying certainty. Because love isn't measured by how much of yourself you surrender. It's measured by whether 2 people can build a future where both voices matter. Months later, I heard through mutual friends that Daniel's mother had moved into his house. Apparently, the arrangement worked well for them. And honestly, I hoped it did. She got exactly what she wanted. So did I. The biggest difference was that my future finally belonged to me. Sometimes people think the happiest ending is the wedding. For me, the happiest ending was the moment I understood that choosing myself wasn't giving up on love. It was refusing to lose myself in the process of finding it.